Hey friend, Jason here with jasonhaigmusic.com. Today I'm coming at you with another video on my 4-step mix prep process. These 4 steps are the things that I do every single time I get a session in, whether I'm mixing my own music, if I'm mixing for a client, it doesn't matter. It's the same 4 steps every single time. And following these steps allows me to work faster. It gives me a little bit more consistency in the output of what I'm actually mixing. And it familiarizes myself almost like muscle memory with my workflow, that things are always living in the same space. And when I hear a problem, I know exactly where to go to fix it. I don't have to search through plugins or chains or whatever to find what I'm looking for. So let's dive into Pro Tools here and we'll get started. Okay, so here we are in Pro Tools, and step 1 of my 4-step mix prep process is organization. You need to organize the session from the get-go the same way every single time. So right now I've loaded my template. I've imported all the audio into that template, and I've color coded each of the tracks to reflect the group that they belong in, right? So if you look, all my drums are blue, my basses are purple, my keyboards are brown, peach, whatever. My synths are also blue. My strings are red, guitars are light blue, swells are here in the middle, and then vocals are yellow. I do this on every single session. It is the same colors every single time. So as I scroll through, I know, oh, there's my basses. You can catch everything really quickly with your eye, and it helps you navigate the session without having to stop and read and go through everything individually. So the other thing that I want to point out is this track order. I always lay everything out like it would be on an old school analog console. My drums are all to the left, followed by their bus and their process drums bus. That's where I would add a compressor and smash everything and then do kind of a parallel drum mix. Then my basses come in, my pianos after that, synthesizers all the way down the line. Everything's separated by its own group. So when I come back in, I can either pull down the entire group here if it's in a group, or I can just adjust it over here if I've got automation and things happening on these faders. It's kind of a 2-step foolproof way to make sure that you always have quick control over your track volume and don't have to worry about going back in to rewrite automation down the line. The last thing I'm going to say, if you're in Pro Tools or any other DAW for that matter, is make use of groups. Both in the edit and the mix window, groups are going to be a lifesaver. In Pro Tools, the shortcut to create a group is just Command G. And I already have one, but we'll do these guys. Here's your group. We'll name it Aux Percussion. Do you want it as a mix group, an edit group, or both? I like it as both. You say OK, and then it gives you these nice little indicators up here that you're in the drum group, you're in the bass group, you're in the piano group, etc. Again, so later on when you're mixing, if you need to, you can have quick control of all of your drums. Everything's just too loud, got to bring it down. Everything's too quiet, got to bring it up. And then if you've got automation running, like I said before, you can use your submix fader to bring down the automation that's going to it as well. It's just a way to cover your bases to make sure that you're organized, everything's kind of working together, and should you need to make changes, you've got a couple different places that you could do that. So that's organization. Step 2 of this process is going to be gain staging. So let's flip over to the edit window, and Pro Tools has this really magical little function called clip gain. Clip gain lets you, in the edit window, directly affect the gain of each audio clip individually. And this is something that I do at the beginning of every session because should I, like for a lead vocal, chop everything up and put it to time so I've got a million different little slices, if I do it once at the beginning of the session, set my gain, every single slice from here on out is already set. Don't try to do it later. It's going to be a nightmare. You can see on all these other tracks in here, for the most part, maybe not the strings or the synths because those were good. But here's the bass, plus 1.7. Bass stereo, plus 1.7. Piano was a little quiet, 2.6. 9 times out of 10, things are going to be recorded too hot. I find myself pulling down the volume way more often than boosting the volume. Maybe it's just the sessions that I'm getting, but people do tend to record things a little bit too hot. Typically, my goal is minus 19 to minus 20 RMS. In layman's terms, if you're playing the drums, everything is coming right up to the top of the green before it hits the yellow. That's your target. And I've already gone through and gotten these pretty darn close. Some of them are a little hot, but that's okay. Nothing's clipping. That's the most important part. If you're clipping, you're not going to be able to unclip down the road. So you got to be careful with this one. But getting everything to a reasonable gain stage is a huge step in the right direction for getting a really awesome mix. Do be aware that drums are a little bit more transient heavy than some other instruments like strings or synths or whatever. They're going to peak a little bit higher, but as long as your RMS volume is still pretty in control and you're not hitting the top of the meters, you're going to be just fine. So gain stage, check. Next, we're going to create a static balance. Now, what do I mean by a static balance? A static balance is basically a rough mix without using any plugins. The only thing you're allowed to use is volume and pan. This should be about 15 to 20 minutes of your process. You don't want to take too long on it because you're going to start to get a little too deep. But at the same time, you want to find a space for each element in your mix to live, using panning, using volume, things like that. So a perfect example, these pianos, because they're stereo pianos, I want to maintain the stereo image. So I don't want to pan them on top of each other or pick a direction. But I did find that piano 1 is a little higher, piano 2 has more mid-range, and piano 3 is the bottom end. So I blended those three together with volume to make them all sound like one piano. The synths, on the other hand, over here on synth 3 and synth 4, I panned left and right. They're both playing something really similar, but they're not stepping on each other with panning. If I would have done it with volume, you would only have been able to hear one and not the other. I just didn't like it. So take a listen to the song. This is the rough balance that I've dialed in without adding any effects or any craziness. I just wanted to find a home for each instrument in the mix without anything stepping on each other. It's all about finding space for everything so that it feels full, but not claustrophobic.
You lock the door because you told me that you didn't want to fight, that you didn't want to fight. And if I go, you'd never know because it would be in the middle of the night, in the middle of the night. But I won't be here waiting for you. And I know when you go out the door that you won't be returning in the middle of the night. And you know when I go out the door that I won't be returning in the middle of the night. And just like before, you're back.
All right. So there you go. Just a little idea of how I balance this stuff. You certainly should not be mimicking my balancing. Every track is different. Every mix is different. But starting out with something where you focus on getting a good, solid, well-rounded mix without any plugins is a very important step in the process because it'll keep you from making decisions like diving in on a kick drum before you've even listened to the full drum take. How do you know what that kick drum is supposed to sound like? How is it going to relate to the bass? How is it, it gets you thinking about relationships within the song as opposed to that super sweet new compressor that you just bought that you can't wait to use on the vocal. So step 4, and the last step of the process, is to check the headroom on your master fader. You want to make sure that after you finished your static balance, you haven't already come out of the gate so loud that you don't have any room to go from here. Even before mastering and mix bus processing, just a simple vocal ride or a synth solo or something that you want to feature, you need room for that. So you want to leave yourself probably around 6 dB or so of headroom at the loudest point of the song, so that when you do those rides or when you add your mix bus compression, there's somewhere for it to go. If you're already slamming the meters coming out of the rough mix, it's just going to sound flat, and all the mixing in the world isn't going to help you. So I'm going to play the song at the loudest point, which should be the last chorus. And I'm going to check my volume level over at the master fader.
And I know when you go out the door that you won't be
So
returning.
I had already adjusted this, it looks like. And you can see my limiter kicking in just a little bit right here. That's okay, but I still feel like it's a little bit loud. So I backed this thing off to about 4 dB or so. And now I'm sitting right around -6. This is a very full song with a lot of tracks, a lot of things going on, a lot of layers that all have to work together. It's part of the reason I chose this one for this particular tutorial. As we go through and mix, I'm going to show you how I handle those layers, how I feature certain layers and let the song evolve, and then also how I finish out the mix, from polishing drums, polishing vocals, adding automation, things like that. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I hope you got something out of this, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so that you can get notifications of videos coming out in the future. Also, make sure you pick up my free home studio survival guide. The link is posted in the description of this video below. It's an invaluable resource jam-packed, full of tips, tricks, reviews, and recommendations for artists, producers, and home studio owners, no matter what stage of the game you're in. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.